Hey everybody, welcome back to the basement, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be exploring the newest character in the decades-old story that is the model train hobby. And that is the Lionel Base 3. So let's get started right here on Chris's Trains and Things. So the Base 3 has been in the news, if you will, of the three-rail O-gauge hobby for the last few weeks since it was leaked in an article that was going to be published. And we knew that there was going to be some new feature on the Vision Line Class A that was announced at York in the fall. And we found out that that was connected to the Base 3. And so what exactly is this? Well, the Base 3 is a bridge which connects all of Lionel's current command systems, which is great. The theory behind this is that you don't have to have all of these separate remotes anymore. You can have one remote, or you can use the Cab 3 app, which is going to be on a phone or a tablet, and you won't have a plethora of remotes if you have Lion Chief Plus 2.0, TMCC, legacy engines, you name it. All of those different variations of command can now be used through one base unit, which is great. Right? That's absolutely fantastic. You may have noticed that it actually looks like the Hellgate Bridge from New York, which is a famous model, a bridge that Lionel has done in the past. So courtesy to Dave Olson for the thinking on that. Everyone thought this thing was huge when the first images came out, and then it was obviously released in the 2022 Volume 1 catalog right there at the very beginning, and everyone thought this thing was huge, and it's actually not. It's about the same size as the current legacy base. So it's not going to take up too much more room on your layout or at your command center, which is pretty nice. So all this is great, right? I no longer need all of my remotes. It's going to all be used in one place. Not so much. If you've been in this hobby for any point in time, or look on any of the forums or watch any of the reactions online, you know that there's been a lot of mixed reviews about this. But what is something that we know when we have change is we're going to have people on all ends of the spectrum. And who do we hear from? Usually the squeaky wheels or the voices that are the loudest. And in this case, it's a lot of the folks that are a little frustrated because they are in disagreement with the direction that Lionel's going on this. So I wanted to talk about that today, kind of give you my perspective on it. And so that's what we're going to do here. So as we think about it, what's the main issue with the Base 3? It's getting rid of this, which you're not getting rid of this. Keep that in mind. If you have a Cab 2 remote, if you have the Cab 1L, you can still use your remote with the Base 3. Now, Lionel did discontinue the production of the Cab 2, which is a bummer because this is a great remote. What's the best feature on this for a lot of people? The quillable whistle, right? This is a feature that we don't have on the DCS remotes from MTH. It's something that you won't have the tactile feel of a remote if you're using an app, right? It's just a flat screen. So you're going to lose a lot of those features that we like. For me personally, I really enjoy the ability to quickly toggle between my engines. I like having everything on just a separate handheld. I do a lot of filming on my phone, which is why I'm not holding it in my hand right now. So if I'm filming trains, I'm not going to be able to control them without having a phone or a tablet designated to just operate the layout. So that's going to make things a little bit more challenging for me. Now, obviously, I have my Cab 2 remote, which is going to be helpful. But if this breaks, then, you know, you're kind of up a creek. Now, the Cab 2 is not being produced anymore, but the Cab 1L is still being produced. And so that doesn't have the screen, but it still has some of the other features and things like that, just not quite as many as this does. Now, one of the things I just mentioned is that whenever we have something that changes, we're going to have a divide in the hobby. And so when we think about, and not just the hobby of model trains, but in anything, in industry and business, whenever there's a change, there's going to be a divide. We're going to have our early adopters. And in this case, the early adopters are the folks that have already, before the end of January, have already placed their pre-orders for the Base 3. They are ready to go. They know they're getting it. They're already placed their pre-orders. They're good. Then we're going to have the skeptics, or the people that are just like, they're not ready to take that jump yet. And so they're going to be the folks that are going to sit back and be like, I'm going to give it a year or two, let them iron out any of the issues, and then maybe I'll buy one later on. And then you have the deniers, the people that are going to dig their heels in, that are probably a lot of the louder voices that we see and read about on different forums online or in some videos that think that they use words like this is dumb, it's stupid, things like that. So they're kind of going through those stages of grief of losing this, right? And that's fair. And I think that we all have to recognize the fact that everyone's allowed to have their own opinions when things are changing. And we all handle that differently based on where we're at. It could just be you had a really bad day, then heard this and was like, the straw that broke the camel's back. This is ridiculous. I'm getting out of the hobby. That's their prerogative. It's fine. For me, I think that this is a good thing. I don't like the fact that they're not making this anymore. So if it breaks, I'm going to have a problem. And I'm not a huge fan of using my phone to operate trains. I've done it a few times here and there, but overall, I'm not too into that yet. Even with the MTH Wi-Fi system that I have, I've used the app a couple times and it's okay. I just have the remotes, so I'd rather just use those for now. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'm usually an early adopter. I'm relatively young and I'm pretty savvy with technology and things like that. But I was a little skeptical at first until I saw the demos with Dave video that was out about a week or so ago, where Dave Olson demoed the Base3 prototype that they have. And I was able to see, and you can see as well if you click on the link that, if I remember to post, should be here or here, that you can, the ease of programming a Lion Chief engine, the Lion Chief Plus, Legacy, whatever, is so simple using the Base3 that I was kind of blown away by the simplicity of it. I was like, that's pretty cool. Especially, I have children, we're acquiring more and more Lion Chief engines, so it would be really nice to be able to get rid of a lot of those remotes. But then I'd have to have my child use my phone, so we're up in the air on that. So let's dive a little bit deeper here. And this is all broken down. There's a lot of details here in the catalog that explain some of the features of the Base3 itself. Some of the features are, and the new feature on the Vision Line engine is that it can have 4-digit addressing. So when you're addressing an engine on your current legacy remote, you can only number engines from 01 all the way up to 99. So you're limited in the amount of engines that you can put, which is why then Lionel released the 993 expansion set, so you can have another remote to add another, 100 engines or so. The Cab 3 can number engines from 01 to 9999. So you can have a lot more engines in your roster and be able to keep them all on one system. Now, does anybody have 9,999 engines? I would assume not. But if you're running a club, if you have a layout that a lot of people come over to regularly, like you're in a club, but it's your personal layout, the Base3 might be great because everyone can just have theirs programmed in and ready to go when they arrive at your layout. For the rest of us that don't have that many engines, not totally necessary. But here's the thing, for me, I tend to lose track of which engines are programmed into what numbers on my remote because you only have 2 digits that you can program in. So by having 4, you can use the entire cab number as your address on the Base3, which would be nice. But of course, this remote can only still do 2. So to address in 4 digits, you'd have to use the Cab 3 app. And the only engine that can do it right now is going to be the Class A. This isn't backwards compatible for previous legacy engines. In fact, any legacy engine in the new catalog still only has 2-digit addressing. So if you've got 200 engines at home, you can still only address them by 2 digits. So that's just something to keep in mind. Don't get this if you have a lot of engines and think, finally, I'm going to be able to put my whole roster in this at one time. It's still not going to work that way. So we're going to have to wait until that technology is rolled out into other legacy engines down the road. So thinking about why are they going to an app? Well, we all know that we're in a time and space where computer parts, computer chips are very expensive and in short supply. And so the components of this remote, this was developed over 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, I'm not exactly sure. The components in this are outdated and they're expensive as well to get what you need to operate this system. And so if we're moving to something like the Base3 that has Wi-Fi built in, it can automatically update through the app on Wi-Fi. So when Lionel pushes out firmware updates, you access it on your app and you can push it right into your Base3. That's fantastic. I have like an old netbook Windows computer that I have the updating software on that I have to then plug into the base of my legacy base, put on a memory module, and then put into here. It's a clunky, out of date system to update. Now we can just push these out through the app, send them through Wi-Fi to your Base 3, and it's updated. And the app itself is going to get those firmware updates automatically through the app store that you use. So from a firmware perspective, it's so much easier to keep these things up to date compared to using these handhelds. And so if Lionel continued to produce a handheld like people are asking them to do, then my guess is they would have to continue to update it all the time. And maybe not just the firmware, but the actual design of it itself. Because if they're coming out with new features on their locomotives, if it's an app, they can just update the app and have those features built right into the app. If it's something like this, they might not be able to put the feature into whatever the remote is, the static remote that they have. So then what happens is we become part of a market like cell phones, where each year Samsung and Apple and Nokia are coming out with new phones each year because they're updating, right? We know how fast technology changes. So do we really want Lionel releasing a different legacy remote or a different Cab 3L remote every year, every 2 years? And then all of a sudden, every 2 years, yours is obsolete and now you got to buy a new one. Because we know that that would cause a huge stir within the community. So it's just not feasible or practical for them to come out with a remote that needs to be updated all the time because our technology is changing so rapidly. And we don't want something like this to be holding back progress from what Lionel wants to do.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
A couple of weeks ago, I joined my good friends, Chris RBP, JD Stux, Jason, RJ from RJ's Trains, and Sid from Sid's Trains on a live stream. And we kind of went through the catalog, but mostly just talked and looked at some of your comments and spoke with all of you that tuned in that night. Thanks again for tuning in for that. It was on RJ's channel. One of the things that I mentioned at the end is a way to get the tactile feel back. Now, I'm not by any means an IT person or into developing things like this, but thinking about a way to do this is you could have someone develop a tactile remote like this that you could plug your phone into, right? Think about that. You could have a wire in the back that plugs into your phone. It could have a USB-C or an iPhone plug that could then, the phone could maybe go inside, you could close it up, and that would give you all the app features, but it transitions them to all being tactile in function. So that is a way that maybe someone can produce that would then connect with the app. I don't know if that's something that would even need to be licensed. If you have the means to develop something like that would then pull the app data or the app usage into something tactile or more accessible, that's something that could be produced. And when we think about making sure that we're including folks that might not be able to use a screen, let's say they need that tactile function to be able to feel where they're pointing and things like that. If you have some impaired vision, it's easier to feel where you're pulling down and things like that, so you can make sure you're hitting the right buttons. You can't do that on a computer or on a phone screen or a tablet screen. So thinking about accessibility, that might be another way that we're able to get something more tactile in the future. Now, as of now, it's not the end of January. We're getting close. I have not placed my pre-orders, and at this point I haven't obviously then pre-ordered the Base 3. In fact, when I was mentioning it before, I said I was going to wait a couple years. It's going to be available for the future. You know, it's at least going to be the next 15 years. The Base 3 is going to be around. So I was like, I don't really need to pre-order it now. But the more that I think about it, and after watching the demos with Dave, I'm kind of starting to buy into the fact that would be really nice to have. So I haven't made up my mind yet. We'll just have to wait and see. I usually don't make up my mind to what I'm going to pre-order until it's like the deadline and I have to put something in. So we'll see if I make any adjustments within that. But I think that this is something that is going to be really good for the hobby. I think we need to go into it with a positive perspective. You know, like I mentioned before, change is difficult. I was not around in the hobby when we went from conventional to command control to TMCC. My guess is there might have been some folks, if there were forums around then, that were probably upset about losing the function of the transformer to go to a remote. So, and now we're hooked on the remote, right? So I think that Lionel's moving in the right direction with this. I've seen some posts online about people thinking that there's going to be all these issues with it right away. Well, that's the beauty of being able to push out firmware updates automatically. So they'll be able to update it and correct anything, any bugs or things like that. And they're going to work on it quite a bit. They've already got the prototype that Dave demoed the other day. So they'll be working on it to make sure that it's ready to go when it rolls out. From what I've heard, they're planning for end of year shipping on the Base 3. So that's exciting. So at this point next year, maybe we'll be doing a video of a Base 3, whether that be here in someone else's layout. That's yet to be seen. So that's my perspective. I don't ask you to always agree with me, but I wanted to make sure that everyone understood kind of how I feel and a different perspective on what the Base 3 is and if it's a good or a bad thing. Let me know what your thoughts are on it. I understand that it's a sensitive topic, I guess. So let me know what your thoughts are. Are you buying into the Base 3, or you're going to sit back and relax a little bit? Maybe you regret having pushed off the purchase of a legacy system for a while because you thought you'd be able to get it this year, and now it's been canceled. Those orders have been canceled, which is a bummer. But I tell you what, for someone that's starting to acquire a lot of Lion Chief remotes, I'm excited to only have to use one thing. And even just being able to use this for the Lion Chief engines would be great. So that's where I'm at. Where are you at? I appreciate you getting this far in the video. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. That really helps us out. I'm Chris from Chris's Trains and Things, and we will see you next time.